Good evening, and welcome to, this is the pre-meeting of the Penfield Town Board legislative session. At this meeting, this is round two of our goals and priorities with our department heads. This evening, we're going to be hearing from Recreation, Finance, Personnel, and the Assessor's Office. So without further ado, I'll let the record show that all of the board members are present. Mr. Moore and I are here in the auditorium. Everyone else is in via Zoom. And our first department head up is Mr. Erkfitz with Recreation. So, Mr. Erkfitz, welcome. And the floor is yours to give us a high-level overview of what you've got planned for this year. The board does have copies of all your materials, but gives you an opportunity to talk a little bit, brag a little bit, and highlight some of the things that are going on in Recreation.
Sure. Thank you, Tony. So looking at our 2021 priorities and goals sheet, 3 out of the 4 priorities and goals are actually from 2020 with everything that happened last year. A lot of those really didn't get focused on at all. I do look for being in 2021 with potentially having some new staff come in and some roles changing here in the rec department. A lot of these things I do think are going to serve an even higher purpose for this year. The first one being the community athletic field and indoor space assessment, really just getting a good idea of what sort of things we have around town. That's only going to help myself and the rest of the rec staff kind of guide the upcoming years with what to program for and what to look for maybe outside of the box with new ideas and new people coming in. The other one is a community center facility plan. This was from the master plan that we did finalized back in 2019 and worked on. So really just looking at our current community center, what programs we have here, again, kind of thinking outside of the box of what else we can do with our current plan, and also looking towards the future to see kind of what else is around the county and what other towns utilize currently, and seeing what we could do here in Penfield in the future. Number 3 are adult program offerings. Really all of our program offerings in 2020 took a hit, obviously with COVID and a lot of the restrictions. I have seen an increase the last 2 seasons in the fall and now into the winter as we as recreation staff and also kind of the public are kind of handling the situation and seeing what kind of works during this time and what doesn't. We have a lot more virtual programming, but I do foresee in the spring and summer kind of targeting more adult sports and outdoor exercise and things like that. So we're working on that, hopefully to continue forever, but definitely focusing on it for 2021. And then lastly, number 4, this goes really well with all the great work that our PCTV and website crew have been doing. We're just looking at kind of what we're offering through our online reservation and registration system, how we meet the public. I know one thing I brought up back in 2020 was the new lodge rates and kind of how we're interacting with customers and what they see and trying to make it easier. So we're kind of just taking an overhaul since the website's being updated for the town. We're really looking at how people use our reservation system for lodges, for other facilities. We're gonna maybe expand and start showing our sport teams what athletic fields are being used, and working with our sport groups to make sure we have a very up-to-date what fields being used and at what time, so that other people that aren't as formal and don't have sport teams can go use fields when they're available, and they can just check via our website and making it easier for them. So those are our big priorities and goals, at least for 2021. And also, like I said before, with potentially, hopefully, some new staff coming in, some new ideas and things like that, just overall for the department kind of growing and getting a lot of good ideas in the upcoming future.
Okay. Board questions for Mr. Erkfitz? Comments?
Real quick, Mr. Supervisor. Andy, in the beginning, you were talking about facilities and fields study, are you intending on including some of the users of those facilities and getting their, comments, recommendations, opinions, things along those lines?
I think it was more broad, where we were just looking to see what facilities we have, what size, like pools, what size athletic fields kind of around town. And then if we see some needs, maybe we would reach out to users at that point if we saw a glaring hole or some needs that we would have in the future. But that wasn't intended in the beginning.
Okay.
And you have the 501c group is something that was an accomplishment that's continuing. But what has happened so far of any significance with it?
So everything was finalized back in January, and we got the okay. And then when Chris was still here, we were going to have our first meeting right around the end of March, and then COVID hit and everything kind of shut down. I've restarted those communications with the group. We have a great board. We actually have an upcoming meeting next month to approve what bank we're going to use and start an account there. And then once we have those minutes approved, we can go to the bank, create that. We're kind of trying to hit the ground running in the spring with things opening up and people looking to do more activities. Try to use it as like a new launching pad there.
Okay.
So Andy, it might be good to highlight who you have on the board, starting with your chair and working your way down.
So it's Heidi Rothfuss is our chair. We've got Aggie Hessian, Chan Philbrick, Lance Sieber. We had a couple people kind of bail out due to some COVID concerns that we have to fill those spots. Rich Black is another one. And there's one more off the top of my head. I apologize, I forget. But a really good board. We've met, I think, 4 times. Kind of helped me come along too with where they were. So we're at the stage now of, like I said, trying to kind of open up and get the ball rolling for this spring.
And then do you have somebody working with the PR to how to advertise that residents can contribute towards that fund for?
We've discussed that. We kind of wanted to create the account first, get that there, and then have that information out there. But it has been discussed, yes.
That's fair. And normally, do you have any listing of your thoughts about the parade or the concert series this summer? Going forward with them?
So we did have concerts last July, and everything seemed to go well with social distancing, and everyone pretty much followed the rules. So we are planning at least the concerts right now from June to August this year. We have our first rec staff meeting this Friday to discuss parade options. For the Independence Day event, we do have fireworks already planned, planning a band, planning a stage, just because there is a lot of room to socially distance there depending on what the health situation is at that time. The parade's going to be a little bit trickier with Lenan retiring. We've all done it before, but kind of the logistics, it might be a good time where we kind of review how we do things and what's going to kind of happen with that. So we're going to look at different options and see which one works best. Unfortunately, it might not be until later in this winter or spring where we actually have an idea of what it could look like.
Thank you.
Debbie, looks like you want to say something.
Question. So Andy, great report, thank you. I wanted to ask you, as we're going right now with January 1 opening up for the registrations for our lodges, how are we looking right now as far as capacity and filling those?
Yeah, we were right about 50% reservations compared to where we were last year, which when we opened them up for residents in early December, non-residents started on January 4th. So we've seen about 2 months of reservations for the lodges. And again, it's like 50%. but that was all under the assumption that it was 10 people max. Recently, last week, or a little over a week ago, with the governor saying that the yellow and orange zones went up, we're now at 50, and we have seen an increase in people calling in, reserving for lodges more recently rather than before. It's usually the May, June, July that gets hits for graduation parties and things like that. So I do think that's going to level out more as long as we continue to kind of stay positive and really have our COVID numbers stay down.
And Andy, one follow-up question on that, and with raising the rates, which I thought was very important that we did, have you seen any feedback from people as far as our rates, where we can compare?
So the rates really didn't rise, so it wasn't like a drastic thing. Just because we had so many rates, we kind of condensed them down to an average. I haven't heard anything questioning the rates. We have heard, at least internally, I can say for our staff, that it's a lot easier to give the information to people when they call, because when they call, it's what's this rate for this day, what's this rate for that day. Now it's pretty concise, it's easy to tell, and gets people kind of to reserve a little bit faster.
Thank you.
Okay, board, other.
Hi, Andy.
Yep.
Andy, I
Bob.
just, kind of got me thinking, you mentioned the fireworks. How does that work? I know last year everything was canceled for obvious reasons. But in those situations, you said you're kind of lined up for it though for this year. What's the cancellation policy, you know, even if it's bad weather and not COVID? I'm just curious how that works.
Yeah, for bad weather, that's a little bit different. We do typically put in the contract, you know, a weather cancellation of at least, 24 hours. So we're monitoring it for bigger things like that. Our normal concerts, we do the day of, write a little policy in there. For the fireworks, as long as we cancel before, if they don't light them off, if they don't have their people show, we don't have to pay. For the bands, it gets a little bit easier, just because they're not really starting until an hour before they play, where the fireworks they're setting up kind of in the morning that day.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, other questions, board, for Andy? All right, Andrew, thank you very much. You got off easy tonight.
Thanks,
And,
appreciate it.
Great job, as always. Thank you. And we'll continue on. We'll next go to our Finance Department and our Controller, Ms. Barbara Chertow, who I see is right there. And Barbara, you know the drill, you know the routine. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So as the supervisor indicated, you guys were provided with our list of accomplishments and priorities for 2021. I just wanted to, for 2020, although you have the list in front of you, just kind of highlight a few of those. As number one being the 2020 budget and the 2020 financial status. We are in a healthy position. COVID was challenging, obviously. The pandemic challenged every single department, not just recreation, as Andrew said, but every department. And I think throughout the town, we made good decisions. You guys took the lead and really made decisions on cutting back on things, not hiring where we really, really didn't have to. And in the end, we ended up in a healthy fiscal position, which is something to be said for you guys, because unfortunately a lot of towns cannot say the same thing in New York State and across the country. But our auditors are in right now and they're working on the audit, and I spoke to them today and they said everything's looking really good and they will be working on that. We'll be presenting to the board in March. So that's a positive. And insurance, our workers' comp, once again, the rates went down and going into 2021 and in 2020. And a lot of that is to do with, I think, kudos to Tracy and in HR, a lot of training, a lot of focus on safety in all the departments. So I think obviously we've been very fortunate that we haven't had major incidents, knock on wood somewhere. But I do think that there's been a heavy focus on safety the past couple of years, and I think that is reflected in our workers' comp experience. So those are just a couple of things I think were good positives coming out of a year that most of us would rather forget about. So I think those are good things.
So Barbara, I'm going to interrupt you if I may, because you're not giving yourself enough credit. So I would make sure that we recognize both Barbara and Tracy for the work on that with workers' comp. Barbara heads up our risk management team. We meet each month with our key department heads. Tracy is part of that. And so it's a 1-2 duel that works together. The training, the coordination, the working with our insurance company to make sure that we're doing the right things. And then certainly the department heads. A lot of credit to them, making sure that we're doing everything we can to take away some of those potential things that could cause us accidents. So thank you to both Barbara and to Tracy on that. So please go ahead, Barbara.
Sure. Focusing a bit more now on 2021. As hopefully things normalize over the next few months, obviously we're seeing our rates here in Monroe County and across our region going down. Hopefully that's a trend that continues and things normalize. We will look to pursue investment opportunities once again, as we did in the past few years. We did begin an investment relationship with New York Class as well as Canandaigua National in 2020. So I will look back to them in the next few months, hopefully, when interest rates start going in the right direction. So that'll be something that we'll focus on as we do each year. We are also, for the purchasing side of things, we have DocuWare in place, as you're all aware. Led by Lisa Grosser, we are now expanding that into the finance department. The main focus being DocuWare is a file sharing kind of system. We're looking to reduce paper, which we generate far too much of. So we'll reduce our paper flow, and that way it'll be better for all the trees and better for all of us. And hopefully it'll make things a little smoother, a little quicker. We're rolling that out starting. We've been testing it the past few months, putting it together, and we'll be rolling it out with DPW as the first test subjects next week to start really getting their vouchers and purchase orders put through that system so we can do all electronic approvals and get away from our inter-office mail and hand signing everything. So that's a step in the right direction. For our insurance this year, doing our due diligence, we will be going out to the market for our liability package. That will be happening over the next couple of months. We're looking to test the market, see if we, if we're getting a good deal where we are, if we should pursue another carrier. And in that, we are also going to be testing the market for broker services as well. We have a few brokers we'll approach to see what carriers they bring forth and what they can offer to the town. That relationship is a very important one, the one we have with our broker, as we all the claims are filtered through them, and I look to them as a resource for any of our insurance related claims and activity, in addition to our independent consultant who actually will be working with us to develop the RFP to send out for those insurance proposals. As I said, that'll be in place by June 1st, but we'll be coming to the board to discuss it before then, so you guys will know where we are. As Tony mentioned, risk management, I will continue to be the facilitator of that group for 2021, as I foresee. As you're all well aware, we did start our email safety committee messages. I've been trying to get one out a month, and we did I think they've been well received. I got some feedback on the, walk like a penguin with the weather, and I think people are finding them helpful, I hope. But that was a good idea that came out of the committee, and we'll continue to do that. This month was cybersecurity, a little bit different than kind of personal safety, but certainly another element of our safety all around for our employees. I also, in 2020, I was voted in as a member of the Western Region Council of the New York State GFOA as of April. And I also was selected to be part of a task force for GFOA. I actually was working on that today. Those are kind of great training opportunities. I'm working on, with the group, developing some training modules for other people in the field of finance throughout the state. So that's been educational for me as well, just to work with more of my peers And it's helpful because they're all in different levels, town, village, county, all across the state. And we kind of share news that we know and kind of keep up to date with all the state and federal changes, which particularly in this past year and through the pandemic, there's been a variety of changes that have come down the pike. So that's been a very good thing, and I'm going to continue to be a part of that and hopefully get voted in again when the vote comes up. And other than that, I think we will continue to keep track of the town's finances diligently and keep everything going for all of you.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara. Board questions for Barbara? She did such a wonderful job that answered all your questions ahead of even knowing that you needed to ask them.
Mr. Supervisor, real quick, I mean, I agree with what you said earlier. I don't think Barbara and Tracy give themselves enough credit. 2020 was a very difficult year from a financial perspective for the town of Penfield and for any municipality across the state and across the country. And I know Barbara heard from the town board and offered ideas along working with Tracy about trying to control costs given that revenues were not coming in at a pace that they traditionally would come in under normal circumstances. So certainly having a finance director and a human resources director that embraced the priorities and goals of this town board and you as supervisor under very harsh conditions of COVID-19 in 2020 means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot, excuse me, to the taxpayers of the town of Penfield, since we were one of the few towns that did not raise the tax rate for 2021. Not every town can say that in Monroe County of the 21 towns in Monroe County, but Penfield was the first town to come out publicly and say that we are not going to raise the town tax rate for 2021. And I believe we are also the first town in all of Monroe County to vote on that, not raising the tax rate for 2021 before Election Day. So I just want to thank Tracy and thank Barbara for their efforts and everything they did to control costs and expenses. And ultimately, Mr. Supervisor, you deserve the credit as a leader of the town, leader of town government, for moving us in that direction with your staff. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you. We'd be remiss if we didn't. I think both Barbara and Tracy would tell you that they've got a great team to work with the department heads who do a fantastic job of trying to manage things as best they can, still provide the quality of life for the town and keep their programs running. And they deserve that recognition as well. You're right, it was a very unusual year. Great team. I couldn't think of a better team to be with to get us through 2020 and certainly into early 21. And hopefully by mid-year or shortly thereafter, we get back onto more of a normal run rate overall. So, all right, thank you. Board, other questions or comments for our finance director and controller of the town? Okay, Barbara, thank you very much. As always, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 0600 hours to resume the good financial work of the town. With that, we'll move on to our personnel director, and her other hat that she wears is with regards to overseeing our IT, and that's an important piece that she graciously accepted upon my arm twisting to do that, and has done a great job on that. So with that, Tracy, if you will, please.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. So a brief year in review, because much like Barbara said, we can't wait to get that actually completely in our rearview mirror.
Excuse me, could you just move that microphone in front of you?
Sure. Is that better, David?
Perfect.
Perfect.
All right, thank you. So 2020 started off as expected, but as we all know, it didn't stay that way for too long. As Tony just mentioned, Ann Buck, our prior assessor, retired in March. Ann was not only our assessor at the time, but she was our internal IT coordinator who worked with Synergy, which is our contracted IT company. So as Tony just indicated, in March, I tried to, assume those responsibilities as best I can. I can't say I've done this alone, especially with a lot of help from Barbara. Barbara and I, if you haven't known by now, we do make quite a good team. But especially with Barbara's help with the 2021 IT budget, keeping that, as clean and as responsible as we possibly could. And then the year, right about that end of March, mid or end of March, took quite a turn, and the rest of that year, a great part of the rest of that year from an HR standpoint turned to all things kind of pandemic and coronavirus. As Tony just indicated as well, I certainly would be remiss if I didn't express my own gratitude and pride in the teamwork that the department heads, employees of the town of Penfield, especially in those early days, demonstrated. We were in those beginning times. It was an ever-changing environment with, what are we doing now? What's the latest? And this team stuck together, worked as an incredible team, and something to be so proud of. So there was a lot, again, all things COVID. It was keeping up with briefings and updates from CDC, state, local, the phone calls, the conference calls, watching, governors, and, it was a lot. Initially the quick change to, temporary shutdown and the focus on remote work. We were lacking some of the technologies to do that. Initially, we have remedied that, and we are prepared. Also looking with a critical eye to our on-site facilities. So I'd be incredibly remiss if I didn't mention Eric Tate and the entire facilities crew for taking, again, that critical eye into welcoming employees back into our facilities, doing it safely. Again, just I think in the grand scheme of things, just such an amazing accomplishment that everybody. So again, we hope to put that behind us as soon as we can. There's some lingering effects. 2020 taught us some good lessons. So some of those we actually are, I'm looking forward to actually bringing some of those lessons into 2021 with us. So getting on to this year's priorities and goals, HR and IT, now we're not particularly, it's not a sexy thing. It's pretty steady. It's pretty tried and true from year to year. So our first, kind of priorities and goal, as far as priorities and goals go, the first thing we always look at is an employee engagement. We plan on continuing our efforts, and we always look to expand some of those things, or increasing employee touches, whether that's emails, bulletins, notices on, hot topic subject matter. Laura Sliker, who is in the HR office, is also the lead for the Wellness Committee. She's done a great job with wellness challenges and, that wellness outreach to keep people motivated. She has a slate of monthly challenges to roll out this year. Again, keeping our employees knowledgeable on benefits and things, other, things that are available to them. Retirement system, so that's always important. Training, coronavirus really gifted us with a push, if not a big shove, into online training. We have continued with the virtual learning. We have found our USI, who is our town insurance broker that also helps with risk management. A member of USI also sits on our safety committee that Barbara mentioned earlier. They have a rather robust training component, so we were able to really utilize that to accomplish all the mandatory training that we needed to do under the circumstances. Obviously, we usually use this room, a nice large room, to bring our employees together for trainings, which because of, group size restrictions, we were unable to do. So there was a big hard pivot to online training, which then we have realized that is actually quite beneficial. It's less disruptive to the department workflow. When we doled out the mandatory training, we usually gave a period of 30 days for an employee to complete. Going through a website, we were able to track compliance, so that was easier. We were also able to do it a little bit better, actually, because some, board members, conservation, environmental board, they were always hard to reach, but as long as we had an email address, we could reach them and that they could complete their trainings as well. So overall, our compliance with training actually increased. The next, policies, handbook, and compliance, that's always ongoing, and lately continuous. The current project for compliance sake that HR is working on is the New York State Public Employer Public Health Emergency Plan that is due in April. So we're putting some finishing touches on that. But again, looking at best practices and updating policies and the handbook as needed is always ongoing. In 2020, we did start to seriously look at an alternate payroll service providers. We are hopeful that we can make a change to increase functionality and have things more user-friendly. With also being respectful, obviously, of the budget constraints. Some of the platforms out there are beautiful. They look fancy and they're shiny and they're extremely expensive. But we do believe that we're zeroing in on some other companies that would fall within our current budget, but would make payroll processing a little bit easier, a little more increased accuracy, and again, just a little bit more user-friendly. The last bullet for, ongoing priorities and, our goals and what we do is always succession planning and recruitment. That's ongoing. With the pandemic, we have obviously seen tighter job markets. With that, I believe it is our due diligence to take a look and a little bit more at candidates with a little bit higher scrutiny. And if that means we will be looking at reassessing our current background investigations to see if there's enhancements that could be made there. That's always something to look at. Currently, we background every employee, seasonal, full-time, part-time. We also background our volunteers for our summer rec programs, as well as contractors. So we will be looking to see if there's any, again, with tighter job markets, it would just be doing our due diligence to take a little stiffer look at candidates. For, our goals and priorities for this year, that's about it. I don't anticipate any budget increases or anything like that. We'll continue with, again, the training, looking at for specific HR-centered trainings for the HR staff, the more knowledgeable that they can become and be, and the more helpful and a true resource to the town employees that, so that just goes hand in hand. We'll continue with, we have taken a look at some of our HR professional organizations and service memberships, taking a harder look at what, as far as membership fees and things like that, and what we get out of them, taking a little bit more of a critical look there. So we have streamlined some of those associations. I don't foresee, except for the possibility of a migration to a new payroll system, any large projects that would need to be. On the IT side, again, when I talked about when the pandemic first hit and how prepared we were for remote work, we weren't. We did recall, as some of you might know, some laptops from some of our other boards, so full-time staff could take them home and work virtually as much as possible. We have, with Tony's guidance, made a decision that one of our allotments that we, typically have a schedule of computer turnover as they come to end of life, the replacement schedule, that we did, instead of purchasing desktop units, we did purchase laptop units to take the place of desktop. So if the situation arises again, it's more of a grab and go, and that we'll have a lot more people. We're going to start with department heads, but we'll have a lot more people ready and able to work from home when and if necessary. Hopefully it doesn't happen, on such a large scale again. But even, depending on what projects are going on, it might be, beneficial to have an employee work from home just because it's quieter, less interruptions. But to have that flexibility, we're happy to say that we're going to have to, we'll have that in place shortly. Other than that, like I said, not too much exciting.
Okay, questions for Tracy? A lot of things packed in her day, from computers to hiring to review of policies and procedures and things like that. Okay, seeing no questions at this time, I will say thank you, as always. Thank you for all your efforts. And we will next move on. I don't see on the screen, but I believe our next one up is our Assessor, Chris Lyon. And I'll give a minute to see if we come up on the screen.
Not in the waiting room, not online.
Okay. So what we'll do at this point, we'll take a short pause. Anyone that's on that has presented, Barbara and Tracy, you're welcome to go on to that next action item of your evening. Thank you again for that. And we'll just take a short pause, and if after a minute or two, if we do not have Mr. Lyon online, then we will declare this special session of the board closed, and we'll get him rescheduled for another evening, so we don't let him off the hook. So we'll just pause for just a moment. Again, thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, we are back. We took a short pause after our review of finance and personnel. We had one more item lined up for this evening that appears as though that will be postponed to our next get-together here later in February. So at this time, I'll call this special session of the Penfield Town Board that reviewed our department head goals and priorities for 2021. I'll bring that to a close here at 6:43 p.m. The next time that we'll be back on the screen will be our legislative session that'll begin at 7 p.m. sharp. So thank you very much to all of our department heads that participated. Board, thank you. Hang tight, and we'll be off and running with the legislative session. Thank you.